This movie really crushed it.
Totally crushed it.
It crushed. It crushed. Murdered.
Murdered. It did murder.
Literally. I'm former movie trivia schmodown singles champion Marisol McKee, aka Lady Justice.
And I'm former movie trivia schmodown singles champion Adam the Coyote Collins.
It's that time of year again.
Yes, it is.
It's the Oscars.
We're excited. It is our little Super Bowl, as we've discussed many times. It's a just, naturally exciting time of year. It's an excuse to celebrate.
Yeah, and it's been a long road for the rest of award season, but we really love the symbolism of the Oscars because at the end of the day, as much as naysayers love to criticize it, it is the Mount Everest of celebrating film.
But this year, I feel like we have some pretty well-rounded options.
It's even stronger.
Yep. And there are a couple things that I wish were nominated that weren't. We'll get to that later.
You get a big cultural movie event that also ends up being the two of the biggest Oscar favorites. That doesn't happen a lot.
No.
So I made us a couple of Barbenheimers.
There we go.
Yeah.
What do we have in here?
Well, that's where it gets a little dicey.
Pure gasoline. Well, plot twist, I have a hole in my straw.
Look, if it was the end of the world, I would not drink this. But
I would. I'd have two.
We're always trying every year just to make sure that we at least cover the basis of watching the Best Picture nominees.
Yep.
And we did just that. So let's break the ice into our Oscar show by ranking them. Mm-hmm. We're going to rank the 10 Best Picture nominees as objectively as we can, from what we think is the least deserving to win Best Picture to the most deserving.
All right, rounding out at number 10 for me personally is Bradley Cooper's sophomore effort, Maestro.
That is also at my number 10. So let's discuss it.
Solid biopic, lot of great scenes in there. Especially powerful scene in the third act where he's conducting an orchestra in the twilight of his life.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of authenticity was the focus of this project, you can tell. And Bradley Cooper gives an impassioned performance, but Carey Mulligan is really who steals the show for me and is deserving of her nomination, and lends a lot of heart to this film that I think would have been missing otherwise.
I think that Maestro is a well-intentioned film. Bradley Cooper, obviously, a big passion project for him, and that is on display. I think it has a lot of creative flourishes in there. I think it is a little arbitrary, the shift from black and white to color, but I also think that it's a project that he'd stewed over so more that he had an idea of scenes that he wanted to make rather than make a cohesive whole. So if you don't have prior knowledge of Leonard Bernstein, that's on you. At the same time, it also makes the narrative feel a little more fragmented that I feel is necessary. It doesn't quite capture the emotional scope of his work, the impact of his life, and the impact on his relationship. But it does put a nice spotlight on the drama unfolding in their marriage. And Carey Mulligan does outshine him in this film. I'm happy to see her get nominated down the road for this too. But Bradley Cooper, you can't sleep on his commitment to bringing Bernstein to life, but you do feel the conscious focus on performance in the film. I do think Maestro is an impressive film. I think it is a solid film, but I think it is the bottom crop of the Best Picture nominees this year.
And I think if you have limited understanding of Bernstein's life, it's going to open up your interest in that a lot,
Absolutely.
Especially if you're musically inclined.
Next up for me at number 9 is American Fiction.
Okay, I had that a little bit higher. That's my number 7, actually.
Okay. American Fiction is from writer-director Cord Jefferson. It is his adaptation of the 2001 novel Erasure. A great blend of satire with some comedy drama, with some family drama in particular. A lot of dysfunctional sibling relationships in this. It's a nice hodgepodge of a bunch of ideas, a bunch of social ideas and themes, but I think that it is stretched a little too thin by trying to cover all those things. I think the satire is a little on the softer side for it. Also a little familiar for me, being a big fan of Spike Lee. I've seen these themes hit a little harder in the film Bamboozled and a film from the 80s called Hollywood Shuffle. And I think that American Fiction kind of gets caught up in the middle. It doesn't quite hit its dramatic beats hard enough for me, or its satirical beats hard enough for me, but I do appreciate all the ideas that it brings to the table. I think the satire is a little bit outdated with it. It kind of feels like it would have been more powerful in the mid 2000s to make this movie than in 2023, when I think we're culturally and artistically in a different place, especially in our relation to race. But I still think a lot of the points are transferable and valid and still can exist, but don't hit as hard for me. But I think it is wonderfully acted. I love all the performers in this film. Oh my God. And I'm happy to see them getting some recognition.
The reason I have it ranked a little bit higher is because from the outset, when I watched American Fiction, I connected with it on a human level first. Mm-hmm. I generally relate to curmudgeonly characters, as I'll elaborate on with other movies this year. But when it came to Thelonious Ellison specifically, I just really enjoyed Jeffrey Wright's performance because it was quiet but cranky. And then the satirical elements felt secondary to me. I agree. But because they were secondary, I wasn't distracted by it as much because I was more invested in the characters. Even though we would like to hold audiences to a certain standard of engagement with our society, we occasionally need movies to move the needle a little bit faster. And yeah, a lot of us, might find this story familiar and might find the lessons, something that we've heard a few times, but certain people stand to learn from this. And at the end of the day, also, if you just enjoy it on a human level, I think it's a really solid dramedy. So American Fiction was my number 7, but coming in at my number 9 is Greta Gerwig's Barbie. Really enjoyable comedy, a lot of good messages in this movie. And I really enjoyed the way it was presented, the production value, the acting, laughed out loud several times. Mm-hmm. And I just love that this is the kind of blockbuster that resonated this year. This is a movie that connected with wide audiences, broke $1 billion, right? And yes. The reason why I don't have it ranked higher against the other films is, for me, I engage with it to a certain level. I felt its runtime a little bit, and a lot of the arcs, as far as the Kens were concerned, I got the point early on. But at the end of it, it felt like a bunch of vignettes kind of stitched together very cleverly and edited very well.
That's fair. I do agree with a lot of what you're saying about Barbie. I like the Barbie movie. Hell, I was President Barbie for Halloween.
Yeah, that's
damn right. But I felt the scattershotness of the script, and I felt a lot of ideas being conveyed literally in that movie, and that took me out of it for a lot. It's an ambitious, fun idea that I think is mostly successful. Hats off to Greta Gerwig, hats off to the crew, hats off to the actors for taking this commercial material juggernaut, this Mattel product, and putting every possible feminist idea into it as possible. This Frankenstein event of pop culture. I admired Greta Gerwig for having the right mentality about this. She's like, yeah, I'm selling this product, and no, this isn't high art necessarily, but it's also my chance to put every idea I possibly can into this film. That I'm paraphrasing there, but that's what this movie feels like, for better or for worse. So it doesn't 100% work or flow for me, but it is still fun.
If you're going to take something this commercial and really workshop it the way they did, I think they did something that is ultimately quite special.
It's not a movie that I'm going to rewatch a terrible amount, but I still had a smile on my face throughout the whole thing. And I can't deny the impact that Barbie's had.
So on to my number 8, which would be Celine Song's Past Lives. Mm-hmm. A really stirring drama about unrealized love that may or may not be rediscovering late in life. And what I found so searing about this movie was the emotion of it. There was a lot of honest emotional presentation. It's a journey of a woman who experiences closeness with somebody early in her life, meets someone else after, marries that man, and then reconnects with that first person later in life. And it leads to a lot of interesting, dramatic tension. And I was engaged with it the whole time. I thought it was shot beautifully, acted to perfection. Honestly, the reason I don't have it ranked higher isn't because I think it's bad at all. I was frustrated with the characters. And that's ultimately probably part of the point. And I don't hold that against the film at all. but I was frustrated with, frankly, a sense of entitlement that I felt applied to the two main characters. And then the husband character, the third party in this, is kind of given the short shrift in a lot of ways, I felt. However, I felt it was all presented frankly and maturely. And regardless of what your takeaway is of it, I was really, really engaged with it the whole time.
I gotta get you a little shirt. This is Justice for Husband. All that emotion you're talking about is what made it soar for me. I really love challenging movies in that sense. Movies that challenge and talk about kind of taboo feelings that I think a lot of people have more than they care to admit. And I think I love how universal this movie is in a lot of ways about reconnecting with something from your past, whether it's love or not. It could make you think of just a past decision in your life, but specifically about love. And then people changing their lives they've left behind, especially Americans, and lives they've left behind, families in other countries, loved ones in other countries. I think there's so much relevant to so many people in this movie. I think there's so many truths in it, and I think it's all portrayed very delicately. And that's what boosts it up higher on the rankings to me, to be closer to a best picture representation for the ages. And we're at 7 for me now, and that is Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon.
Okay. Yep. That's another one I had a little bit higher at number 4 for me.
Fair enough. Killers, you can already see our review where we go into a little more detail of this on our channel previously. But for me, Killers is very impressive. Production value, costume design, so much care went into recreating this world, and so much respect went into making sure that this story is told. I had so much light shed on this story about the Osage and how they were systematically picked off. I had so much more light shed on that for me than I previously knew, and I thank this movie for doing that. And that does make it very important. I'm really happy Scorsese chose to tackle this project. As we said in our review of it, I just think that for me, what holds it back is that just the perspective of the screenplay.
Just made my favorites of the year, and the reason why is because of its staying power. I was just as frustrated with it the first time I saw it because I felt the frustration on behalf of the Osage characters in this movie. It's hard not to. But what I found so effective is the fact that I felt held hostage by everything that was happening here. I actually think what serves this movie well indirectly is the fact that Leo DiCaprio is upstaged by Robert De Niro and Lily Gladstone, both of whom are deservedly nominated for this movie. Both give the standout performances of this movie. Leonardo DiCaprio, by comparison, plays a boob, and you know what? Like he's good at that. This guy is a fool, but you know he's a dangerous fool, and so are so many of his ilk, and that's what I walked away from.
So many innocent people lost their lives at the hands of dangerous fools.
I think Killers is not a fun watch by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one that is stuck with me for a lot of reasons. All right, and then next up for me at number 6 is Yorgos Lanthimos' most recent film, Poor Things. A great movie by any measure. I think this is just not only a confrontational and exciting movie to watch, it's playful. It's very, very playful. It leans into the fantastical elements, and it has so many great thematical overlaps with the best parts of Barbie. You know, it's
wild.
It's about stepping outside of a life of artificiality and realizing oneself. What Poor Things does that takes it to another level is how incredibly crass it gets. Yes, Emma Stone gives a fantastic lead performance. Starts off a little quirkier than I expected, but really blossoms into this fully rounded character.
So delicious about Poor Things is that wrapped up in all these themes of sexual liberation and breaking free of these restrictions and these bondings. I love how loose it is and broad it is with all of that. I never felt in any bit of Poor Things that I was being lectured to, or it was taking a definitive, moral stance on any of this stuff. It was just exploring these ideas. And that really helped me unload and just kick back and let it just wash over me. All the bizarreness, all the weirdness, all the kinkiness of it just wash over me. You could tell this movie is not taking itself too seriously. And it's just freaking gorgeous to look at. It's this vomiting of painted sets and brilliant costume design and colors and wacky performances and dark humor and some tastelessness and some tastefulness. So Poor Things is just this bizarre, really wacky, fun choice to have in an Oscars, best of list this year. My number 6 was Jonathan Glazer's Zone of Interest.
How poetic. My number 5.
Really happy that this is getting the accolades and the nominations. Zone of Interest is a fascinating, I would like to say, experiment about the Holocaust from an angle that we've never seen before. I can't say that it was a very emotionally stirring movie. It is clinical by design and really turns it into a human interest story in the places that we least expect.
The point of view of a Nazi family. Let's just call it what it is. And in this case, the presiding, ranking officer at Auschwitz and his family. What's so haunting about this movie is the way it's presented, so matter-of-factly.
So mundane.
And the phrase that surrounds this film, and this is a phrase I've heard time and time again, is the banality of evil. And that is the ultimate moral of this story. That is something that across storytelling through the ages is the ultimate incarnation of evil, because apathy is the worst thing you can exhibit. And this family, especially the adults, are going out of their way to disassociate themselves from what's happening around them. It's disgusting and horrifying. And I walked away from this being really affected by just the zoomed out, very blunt presentation of what was happening.
Very diorama-like filmmaking.
Very much. And the lack of sensationalism, which frankly for a filmmaker like Jonathan Glazer is not what I've known him for up until now. So I think it shows his range. I think it shows how particular he is about his projects, because he hasn't done many movies.
By avoiding realizing the action, what is happening in these concentration camps, and focusing on the passive evil just in the day-to-day lives of these people, this helps you insert this story in today's world to so many things that's going on. Getting down to it, number 4 is Anatomy of a Fall for me.
All right, we're pretty much in step. That's my number 3.
Okay. Unsurprisingly, because this was in both of our top 10 favorite films of the year. I really love the peeling of an onion like format to this film.
And what Anatomy of Fall does so well is it takes us across the pond to France and shows us what it's like to see a trial play out in Europe, specifically in France. Even though the presentation of the trial is a little bit different, the thing I love about the movie is the universality of it. You realize that when it comes to a circumstantial evidence trial, you're trying the person's character more than anything else. Sandra Hüller's character is put on trial kind of like in this Orwellian way, where she's literally sitting up in the stands and has all but a spotlight shined upon her while she's being questioned. The courtroom stuff is great, but then there's flashbacks that are really effective, and we get to certain points and revelations in the story that feel earned when we go back into that flashback because of the work that's been put in the present. This movie is presented very, very compellingly, tries very hard to pull its punches at certain moments. It's not trying to be over the top in any way, and I think that works to its benefit.
Call me cynical. I think that the court system, no matter what country it can be in, can be inherently so flawed. This movie doesn't shy away from that at all. And what does justice mean anymore when it's really up to human subjectivity to decide someone's fate? That's never not going to be relevant, whether that movie's made 80 years ago or today. And so Anatomy of Fall gets high marks and should be really, really awarded and commended for tackling that stuff head on.
Well, we made it this far, so I guess it's time to start fighting. My number 2 is The Holdovers.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I guess that's the end of that fight. I love The Holdovers. I'm not going to mince words. Alexander Payne has been one of my favorite American directors my entire adult life. I saw About Schmidt in high school and I fell in love with his style. And ever since then, I've always looked forward to what he's done. He's had some highs and lows. Holdovers arguably is one of the pinnacles of his entire career, along with Sideways back there. This movie is brazenly cynical, but endearingly so.
Yeah.
Paul Giamatti's character, teacher Paul Hunnam teaching at this prep school in 1970, his chemistry with Dominic Sessa throughout this movie is just so fun to watch. And then you have Divine Joy Randolph rounding out the troupe with this found family dynamic. I loved it.
I can't not rank this film this high in the Best Picture race because I think that I've seen it a couple times now, and with each person, there's something for everyone with this film. And like I said in our top 10 video, a far more heartwarming movie than I would have expected from Alexander Payne. This is really, truly a film that brings people together while not shying away from the hard, ugly stones you got to turn over in life. It's a very bittersweet bonding movie. Mm-hmm. And that's a little more rare than you think. We're used to these big feel-good broad movies that really are big this time of the year, and for The Holdovers to have this little bittersweet tinge to it is really special and does make it stand out, and really helps it climb up the ranks here. This is a movie for everyone, and I think that a lot of people are getting a lot out of this, and it's such a hit because it truly has those kind of legs. I would love to see this movie pull away with Best Picture on opening night, but I don't think it will pull it out. And we're here. The film that we think is the most deserving of winning Best Picture at the 2024 Oscars is indeed Oppenheimer. It's just all roads are leading to this with this one, leaving out the fact that this was one of the biggest critical hits of the year and box office hits of the year. Mm-hmm. I think that it is paramount in its message and its scope, and it's a full package with electric filmmaking, electric performances, and a searing, haunting, relevant message.
Christopher Nolan has done a great job carving out a slice of film history for himself. He's worked very hard at it. But what I think he does so well with Oppenheimer is he is obsessed with the subject matter, and that translates.
Yes.
We had a lot of black and white and color combos with the Best Picture nominees this year. We had that with Maestro. We had that with Poor Things. But I think Oppenheimer earns it the most because of the way it distinguishes the narratives. It worked for me. And I agree with the universality of its doom crying, which is earned. Yes, it is literally talking about the atomic bomb, which in and of itself is incredibly terrifying to consider. But it applies to so many existential crises that we deal with on an everyday basis. And that is why I think it is continuing to resonate at the level that it has. It's so encouraging to see a film like this, a 3-hour R-rated biopic that's set in the 1940s to nearly crack $1 billion is, I think, one of the great accomplishments of film-going audiences in 2023. This film's a conversation, and it's also something that will hold up on its own very well. So I vote for it for Best Picture, and I think it's going to win Best Picture.
And now, before the next show starts, let's enjoy an intermission. You'll find our snack bar chock full of good things to eat and drink.
And now on to our picks for the 2024 Oscars. We're going to go through these by category. We're going to leave out the categories for which we haven't seen the majority of the nominees. So no shorts, documentaries, etc.
So starting off with Best Original Score, I have some really great contenders in here. Robbie Robertson with Killers of the Flower Moon. Subtle, but pulsating. And just a quick shout out to Laura Cartman, who did American Fiction. Really cool, jazzy score. Very enjoyable. Just
very swanky. Reminded you were saying of Sideways, which I thought was cool.
Rolf Kent, frequent collaborator with Alexander Payne. A lot of good stuff. What I think will win and should win is Ludwig Göransson's score for Oppenheimer. A score that I know, thanks to an interview I heard from Ludwig, was written before the film was shot. And Nolan based a lot of the visuals around Göransson's score, which makes sense.
Everything about that film is riding on that score, which, to be fair, it does happen with a lot of Nolan films, but it's really effective in Oppenheimer and is deserving of the Oscar. Though I do love the oddballness of Poor Things. Just gotta give it respect.
Go Goranson. That didn't work.
No. Next up is Best Song. I don't think this is a particularly strong year for Best Song. I do think there are a couple in here that it's exciting to see them nominated.
If I had my pick, it would be the song from Killers of the Flower Moon, which translates to a song for my people. I'm not going to try to pronounce the Osage word. It is a traditional tribal chant song on its surface, but it's genuine and it's original to that film, and I think that makes it special.
It would be kind of fun. I think the Golden Globe shook it up. It would be wacky to see I'm Just Ken win. And you know what? I'm going to say the hell with it. Billie Eilish's song, also from Barbie, is beautiful, but she has already won, which frankly, I think that's the year Beyonce should have won. I'm just saying.
If I were a betting man, I would bet on Billie Eilish to win.
On to Best Sound. I think this should absolutely go to Zone of Interest.
That is one of the strengths of the movie, the subtlety of the sound design, the things you hear in the background, incredibly haunting, especially if you're in a theater with surround sound. Frankly, kind of terrifying stuff.
Yeah, we get so used to the sound Oscars going to the biggest, the most bombastic sound mixing and everything. Something that Zone of Interest is doing is, I was straining the entire movie, paying attention to hear like a pin drop in that movie because decibels were that critical. Oppenheimer blew me away, but a lot of films can blow you away. It doesn't take anything away from the skill it requires to do that, but Zone of Interest is particularly special. And I wish that it would get rewarded with an Oscar win, but I don't think it will. I think it will go to Oppenheimer.
As a technical achievement, that movie is going to be the one to beat in a lot of categories. It's going to be tough to beat. All right, so moving on to makeup, I would pick Society of the Snow. I was excited to see it nominated because we're so focused so often on what is on an actor's face that we don't pay attention to what's happening beyond that. And what Society of the Snow does so well is it depicts what happens to the whole of the human body under duress. I honestly think, though, Maestro is the one to beat in this category because, Darkest Hour, things of that ilk, things with prosthetics and great acting, you marry those two, it's hard to beat at the Oscars.
It is. And Bradley Cooper does look terrific as Leonard Bernstein. I will admit that. I will shout out that I do love Poor Things. I do think that should win. I just love the Frankenstein makeup on Willem Dafoe. But I do think that it will go to Maestro as well. Costume. This is tough this year for me. Love Killers of the Flower Moon. The unbelievable attention to the Osage wardrobes and these outfits and this culture is so vividly brought to life. But what I love about Poor Things is that it heightens that reality and mixes so many bastardizations of Victorian era clothing and creates these completely new, creative, wildly creative and imaginative outfits. And then we've got Barbie in there.
The thing that I think sets Barbie apart is that all these other films are more or less period pieces. Impressive, accurate, stunning looking period pieces. But Barbie had to go with this heightened concept, and I think that was one of the greatest assets of the film. Expect Barbie to win this category, and I won't be mad. Now, when it comes to animated films this year, unfortunately, I can't weigh in much. I only saw one of them so far, which is Across the Spider-Verse. Solid sequel to a film that I enjoyed quite a bit. I don't think it should win this category, only because I think it's an incomplete story.
I saw a few more of the nominees. I think it's really going to come down to Miyazaki and Spider-Verse. And I'm going to give the edge to The Boy and the Heron. We all keep thinking that this is going to be Miyazaki's last movie, each one that he makes. And I think that The Boy and the Heron, like many of his films, is a really mature encapsulation of a lot of themes of life and death and the beyond. And while I don't think that it is his strongest film, I think it would be a timely time to honor his entire career. I also agree with what you're saying about the incompleteness of the Spider-Verse. I think that will hold it back a little bit, although I think it is more technically dazzling than the first one. And Nimona would be a very dark horse pick. I love the story of Nimona, the story of its pre-production and its way to fight to the screen. But I'm going to give it to Boy and the Heron here.
So when it comes to visual effects,
Go Godzilla!
You took the words right out of my mouth. Godzilla -1 better win this category, or I'm leaving the Oscars.
We gonna riot. We gonna riot, y'all. What are we doing here if we don't give this to Godzilla -1?
Godzilla -1 had a much smaller budget than all the other nominees, and it frankly looks better, so it better win.
We all saw the video of the visual effects team reacting. This would mean the world to them, and that's not a reason why something deserves to win over something else. But that's kind of the heart of what this is all about, rewarding artists to pour their blood, sweat, and tears into this and do it as creatively and intuitively and efficiently as possible. That's a Godzilla -1 team.
I really hope they get to go up there and collect that Oscar. I am ready for Godzilla to be an Oscar winner. He better win, damn it.
Production design. Look, we got some impressive nominees. They are nominees after all in this category, but I do think Barbie is going to rise to the top of this pack. Just look at that movie. Just look how they brought that world to life. Got to shout out the rest of them. You got Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Poor Things in there, and of course Oppenheimer. Barbie, though. So much pink. So much pink.
For all the reasons, I think it should win costume. I think it should win production design. There you have it.
International film, we're hedging our bets with this one because I only saw 2 of the nominees in this category. So they just happen to be the ones that I'm going to talk about. Pretty hard to deny once your director gets nominated for Best Director and your picture gets nominated for Best Picture of the Year. It's pretty hard to top that. If Anatomy of the Fall had been in here, game would be changed, but it's not. So I think this is going to go to Zone of Interest, which sucks for Society of the Snow.
Society of the Snow is the one I wish would win. I'm so happy it's nominated. I'm glad it's getting the recognition that it is. But I think it's a strong film in any category.
It'll tear your heart out. Editing. We got a lot of long movies again this year.
Oh, quite a few.
So editing is more important than ever. One of the movies that I think maintains its energy is Oppenheimer. Like the score that we mentioned before, I think its editing and its pacing is a powerful part of why this movie hits and ticks. It's one of the things that overwhelmed me about it, but I think I'm in the minority with that.
The way it pivots between, certain time periods, and yes, the black and white and color seemed a little gimmicky the first time I watched it, but the second viewing, it really solidified. I really jive with the perspective of this movie.
I think its only competition would have been The Holdovers. With Poor Things, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Anatomy of the Fall, you do feel all their length after a certain point, which is why I will give Oppenheimer the clear edge here.
All right, moving on to Best Cinematography. And, again, Oppenheimer is going to be tough to beat. There are no digital effects in this movie. None. It's all in camera. That was something that was stated from the outset and at the end of the production by Christopher Nolan. He's very proud of that. And I take him at his word. He said this was a non-digital special effects film, which means the cinematography did all the work. That means it should win.
I can't really argue with that, although I will just mention that I really did enjoy the cinematography of Poor Things. I love the playfulness of all of this. I love Yorgos going for those fish lens shots. I love the blending of black and white and color, which was a lot of the nominees in this category, frankly.
Oh, yeah.
3 of the nominees were both shot in black and white and color. 1 nominee was full in black and white. I love how we're seeing more and more black and white photography growing in movies nowadays, and cinematographers are really having fun and expanding their craft with this.
More and more films that are predominantly in color are dabbling in black and white and getting rewarded for it. And so I hope to see more of it, but not arbitrarily.
Still, Oppenheimer, though.
Oppenheimer. Moving on to Best Adapted Screenplay. Some interesting nominees this year. Some minor controversy around Barbie being an adapted screenplay, but, it was adapted from a concept, a pre-existing intellectual property.
Yeah, why not?
So I get it.
I'd rather have that over than the sequel technicality from last year.
That said, I think given the source material and the final product, I do think this is another situation where Oppenheimer should and will win. The book is something I've only dabbled in, and admittedly, it's the audiobook because I drive a lot, and to adapt it would be daunting to say the least.
I do want to point out Zone of Interest because I think Zone of Interest excels in these technical categories, which I find very fascinating if it was adapted from a novel, a very different medium, and yet soars and really achieves a new level and a new angle of appreciation through its film format. But I do think this will go to Oppenheimer. Original screenplay. This is usually one of my favorite categories at the Oscars because these are really where some of, I think, the strongest films are really highlighted. I really want to point out and highlight Anatomy of a Fall. That is the one that I think should win. It's essential to the way that that movie plays out, that the screenplay causes a little bit of doubt and helps you change your perspective each act that follows through there. That's very well written. Though I do think that The Holdovers will win because, as we said before, with that bittersweet edge to that movie, I think it really sneaks up on you.
I thought for the first portion of last year, it was an adapted screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
So when I figured out it was original, it was a no-brainer that it should win this category. All right, we're moving into the top tier of our best categories and starting it off with Best Supporting Actor. I'll cut to the chase. This time around, this particular year, I think it will and should be Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer. A thankless character in a lot of ways, a grade A asshole for the ages, this gentleman that he portrays. That said, he does it perfectly. And it's a great dramatic foil for Oppenheimer's character.
I'm so happy to see Sterling K. Brown in here. Good for Mark Ruffalo. I think I would have liked to see Dominic Sessa in there more.
Sure.
I think that kid was really the star of The Holdovers, and I'm disappointed to not see him here.
And to that point, Charles Melton for May December. I think both and Dominic Sessa should have been recognized in this category, and they just weren't.
Yeah, but if they were in there, I think that Sterling K. Brown would have got edged out. I'm happy to see him there, but I think that Melton and Sessa were more essential to their films, respectively, than Mark Ruffalo and Sterling K. Brown were to their films. And as we said last year, therein lies the point of a supporting actor nominee. Over in supporting actors, though, if you didn't know anything about the way the race was going so far, you would think this was kind of like a wide open field. But at this point, and especially now having seen this film twice, I really do think this is Divine Joy Randolph's to lose.
Based on the momentum, but I also think it's earned.
She is a scene stealer in The Holdovers. Give a shout out to Emily Blunt, who was making the most of an underwritten character, I think, in Oppenheimer, and really bringing home those mic-dropping moments. And of course, Danielle Brooks in Color Purple. Sophie is already a powerful character, and she shined in a role that already had to measure up to a tremendous Oprah Winfrey performance from back in the 80s. I think Danielle Brooks did an amazing job. And we talked about how Jodie Foster was our favorite part of Nyad.
And it's a supporting actress performance, but it's a leading role. And she can do no wrong.
Bring it home, Divine. Directing.
Mm-hmm.
This is an airtight category this year. I know there was a lot of controversy that Greta Gerwig didn't make it in, but I don't know where she would have, honestly. It's a testament to how strong the Best Picture nominees were this year, that we're talking about at least 3 directors that could have easily made it into the Best Picture pool. Alexander Payne, Greta Gerwig, Celine Song. But nobody who's here doesn't deserve to be here. From Jonathan Glazer's laser-directed focus on Zone of Interest, to Justine Triet's beautiful unveiling and clinical pace of Anatomy of a Fall, to Scorsese bringing this saga to life in Killers of the Flower Moon, and then Yorgos making his weird and irreverent sexual liberation farce the only way that he could. And then yet, in spite of all these directors, I still think that this is Nolan's chance. He's been on such a roll this year, and of a director who's had a phenomenal career and one of the most revered of the 21st century. It looks like Oppenheimer is the one that is going to really push him over and help him get that Best Director win. And it is time.
I'll be honest, like I respect Christopher Nolan as a director. I don't love all of his films equally. And I frankly found his last film, Tenet, very frustrating. So for him to come back with Oppenheimer and play to all his strengths and treat it with such respect and maturity, I was really impressed. I think if he's ever going to win an Oscar, he deserves to win for this. At the end of the day, directors, that's another category that I think should be up to 10, because there's a lot of recognition out there that people deserve nominations for.
I won't say put it to 10, but I think it does depend on how strong the year is.
I want it at 10.
Okay, fine. We'll put it at 10.
Just saying.
All right. Did you pick an actor for these actors? I don't think there's a weak one in the bunch. I don't think there's somebody I would edge out here or have somebody else in over them.
My heart, honestly, would pick Giamatti. He was tragically unnominated for Sideways back in the day. Cillian Murphy has always been a great actor.
I knew it. I called it since Red Eye. I was like, that man's going to get an Oscar.
And the thing that's so affecting about him in this role is not only the voice work, the body language, the fashion, and the way he carries himself.
Iconic.
He's such an actor of the eyes. You know, he uses his eyes to such great effect. And you could argue Paul Giamatti does in The Holdovers with his contact lens. It's a little wonky.
Damn eye. But Murphy is the driving force, and Oppenheimer has so much momentum. So if he can take it home on his first nom, go for it, Cillian.
Think about how many people are going to watch Peaky Blinders after this.
Ooh. Nice to see this year we have a Best Actress category free of controversy. I'm happy that Lily Gladstone is here. And I will back up her being nominated in lead actress because she is the emotional heart of that film. I like the layers to Emma Stone's performance in Poor Things. Emma Stone seems to be her main rival here to get this award. They've gone back and forth all through awards season. Sandra Hüller, as we talked about in Anatomy of the Fall, layered, difficult, calculated performance with punctuations of emotionality, and love her for that. Nyad might not be a lot of people's favorite movie, but Annette Bening really does.
She's so good.
She is a bulldog in that movie.
Lily Gladstone, so much of it is nonverbal.
Her expressions, her body language, her everything. The fact that just with a simple glance, you can see so much into what this woman is thinking.
She portrays a character who is so underrepresented. And the fact that she bites her tongue and reacts nonverbally to so many things is why the performance affected me as much as it did.
When you're in a movie starring opposite Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio, and you are the performance that everybody talks about the most in the movie, you've done something right. We're here. We made it to Best Picture. Although I think this is an exceptionally strong year, and I could see like the top 7 movies walking away with gold based on our top 10 ranking of the Best Pictures. I think it will line up as well on Oscar night that Oppenheimer will go home with gold.
And what we've discussed already that Oppenheimer does so well is it drives home its message in a universal way. It's beyond just the message and warning of the atomic bomb.
Get up there, Christopher Nolan. Get that Oscar. Get those many Oscars. This is going to be the big kahuna at the end. All right, make it rain. Nolanites unite. Unless there's a Barbenheimer joke out there to make, and Barbie just La La Land's up in there at the last second. We are so excited for the Oscars. We're going to be watching it Sunday night. We hope you guys are too.
Well, it's a stirring crop of nominees, to say the least, with a lot to discuss. And, Oppenheimer is a juggernaut, to be sure, but all the nominees this year, really impressive.
It's even stronger than last year, honestly. Reading the tea leaves here, I think it's going to slide. The winds are going to slide pretty heavily Oppenheimer's way. I think it edges out a lot of the other films just enough in a lot of these categories. So, but we'll see how this pans out. You never know.
But tell us what you think. Who do you want to see win? Who do you think is going to win? What do you think should be the dark horse candidate?
Yeah, be an agent of chaos. In the meantime, you can follow us as usual here on YouTube or on Twitter and Instagram at Champs on Film. You can also follow us individually on Twitter and on Letterboxd. I'm Marisol_Mariah.
And I'm Eisenthor.
You know what's left.
I'm sorry.
You had to do your over voice. You could probably figure out that it's off.
What is wrong with you?
Every time I think of the name now, I just want to do Oppenheimer. Thanks, Oprah.
Oppenheimer.